Jewish Education in Media is pleased to present L'Chaim, a program that highlights the people, issues, and events of importance to the Jewish community. Now here is your host, Rabbi Mark Golub.
I'm Mark Golub, and one of the most insidious attacks on Jewish life today, perhaps the most insidious, comes from the BDS Movement, the concerted attempt to delegitimize the state of Israel and to portray the Jewish state as a pariah, an apartheid regime, a heartless, colonial, occupying power, humiliating and brutalizing helpless, innocent Palestinians who are portrayed as wanting nothing more than their rights to self-determination and national aspirations in their own Palestinian state. Of course, BDS stands for the three weapons BDS supporters are using against Israel. They want all individuals and nations to impose an economic and cultural boycott of Israel, at least as far as the West Bank is concerned. They want institutions to divest themselves of any economic investments in Israel. And they want governments to impose economic sanctions against Israel, supposedly until Israel ends what they call the illegal occupation of the West Bank and Gaza. And as far as Gaza is concerned, even though Israel has withdrawn every Israeli from Gaza and every Israeli soldier from Gaza, the BDS movement charges that Israel still exercises control over Gaza with its checkpoints, its embargoes, its control of electricity and water. The BDS movement was started in 2005 by the Palestinian BDS National Committee, though many Americans who support BDS have no idea of the movement's genesis. It is very often seen by college students as a human rights movement, fashioned after the heroic efforts of those who sought to end the white apartheid regime that subjugated the black population of South Africa. But there is no honest or objective comparison with anything Israel is doing to Palestinians, to the ways in which South African whites treated the black communities of South Africa, who were totally disenfranchised, discriminated against, controlled by a small white foreign-born minority in every sense, and a black community which did not threaten the white community with violence or murder or with any effort to eliminate all whites from South Africa. And from my personal perspective, as ugly as the BDS movement is, I view it as mindless, intellectually vacuous, lacking all moral authority. I find BDS to be silly. Except that silly people can be mean and ugly and hateful, and therefore they must be dealt with. And among the Jewish groups who are dealing with BDS on college campuses is a fabulous group of young Israelis who are part of Amit Deri's Reservists on Duty and the Gideon Project. And these young people go onto college campuses to deal with BDS. And on this edition of L'Chaim, I am honored to be joined by two of those wonderful people. They are each IDF lone soldiers, American Jews who've made Aliyah without any of their other family in Israel, to be part of the Israel Defense Forces and to then build their lives in the Jewish homeland, the state of Israel. Let me introduce them to you. Kayla Dulin is a lone soldier who was born in Evanston, Illinois, raised in New Rochelle, who became a lone soldier when she was 20 years old and then made Aliyah when she was 23 years old. Kayla now lives in Tel Aviv, where she's studying for a dual degree in law and government at the Interdisciplinary Center in Herzliya. And we're also joined by Josh Malchman, who was born and raised in New Jersey, made Aliyah when he was 19, and became a lone soldier when he was 21 years old. And Josh is also studying at the Interdisciplinary Center in Herzliya in the field of counterterrorism and homeland security. And it is just wonderful to have you both at this table. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for the work you're doing.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much. It's an honor.
There's so much I want to know all about you. I told you by the way we began. First of all, you're both just gorgeous.
Thank you.
And how long are you in the United States, Kayla, to do work on college campuses?
The program is about a week long, and we have the opportunity to see our families after we finish the program, and then we all head back at different times.
Your family is from the former Soviet Union?
Yes.
When did they come to America?
My parents tried to leave the former Soviet Union in '79. They were refused. So they were refuseniks for 10 years, and finally they were allowed to leave in '89, and they came into the States in 1990.
Okay. You were born here?
Yep, I was born shortly after they came.
Okay. To what extent do you think your parents' background as refuseniks in the former Soviet Union had an impact on you as you're growing up here, an American kid, but your parents were born in the former Soviet Union?
It's a part of my identity that I can't take it out. It's something that is a part of me. That and my grandfather being a Holocaust survivor and just growing up in a very Zionist home has for sure shaped me and has given me that push to make the decisions that I've made.
And what prompts you? I think it was at 19 years old you went to Israel? What motivated you?
I think the first time that I decided that I'm going to spend the rest of my life in Israel was when I was 13 years old. Which is funny because it's kind of an age where you don't take kids seriously. The year was 2003. It was towards the end of the Second Intifada. And my mother and I went to Israel for the first time in support of the tourism that had really taken a hard blow. And I remember the feeling, my very first night in Tel Aviv, walking around the streets and feeling this sense of security and the sense of home, which I'd never felt before. And after that trip, I told my parents, I'm going to live in Israel one day. They said, okay, you don't know anything. And maybe I didn't know anything, but that was for sure, and that was consistent ever since that first trip.
That's a lovely story. Were your parents involved in any synagogue life? Were you involved in synagogue life at all?
So my parents were robbed of Jewish education.
Yes.
They weren't allowed to be practicing Jews growing up in the Soviet Union. Neither were my brothers. But their Jewish identity was very important to them. So when I was born, they made the conscious decision to send me to a Jewish school.
Which one?
Westchester Day School. And I am forever grateful for the education that I received there, because otherwise my family wouldn't be able to know what it means to be Jewish and to practice and to really bring back the traditions that were there but kind of got cut off for 2 generations at least.
Okay. As you were growing up, was there Shabbat in your home?
There was Shabbat dinner. We were never observant of Shabbat, but...
Did you have a bat mitzvah ceremony?
Well, I went to a modern Orthodox school, so not so much a ceremony, we had a party.
You had a party?
Yes.
All right, Josh. So
Of course.
what moves you to decide you're going to go to Israel? And you go to Israel, if I understand right, you make Aliyah even before you go into the IDF, correct?
Yes.
So what's the story?
So I was raised in a very Zionistic household. My parents both spent time in Israel. My father was studying for a degree in computer engineering and science, and my mother was a volunteer on a kibbutz called Matsuba, which is in the north of the country. And they raised me very Zionistic and very active in the Jewish community.
What does that mean? You were raised Zionistic.
It means that they instilled in me the values that in Israel we take as paramount, which is being Jewish, being proud of being Jewish, being proud that there is a state that we can call our own. And so in my activities in the Jewish community, in the JCC, in USY, it always came back to the fact that I always knew that at some point I had to make it to Israel.
Interesting. You grew up in a conservative Jewish household?
Yes, I spent a majority of my time at Adas Shalom, which is a synagogue in Marsh Plains. And through the youth movement at USY, I also gained a greater understanding and appreciation for the conservative movement.
And when do you go to Israel for the first time?
I went to Israel for the first time when I was 15.
What circumstance?
It was a trip for tourism, and right after that, a year later, I went as a volunteer through the Dulin Fellowship, which is a program which twins Israeli teens with American teens from all over the country, and they both have volunteer projects, and ours was to run and help create a summer camp for children in Rishon LeZion, which is a central city in Israel, in order to give them a safe space away from homes that may have been subjected to certain troubles, and give them a place where they can enjoy their summer in peace.
And you did this when you were how old?
When I was 16.
Marvelous. Was it a wonderful experience?
It changed my life forever. I mean, up until that point, I really wasn't sure where I was going. I was more or less thinking along the lines that every other American teen does in high school: finish high school, go to college, get a job. Once I had seen that kind of community, and really just connected on like the deepest level with just society in general in Israel, I knew that I at least wanted to see what was there. And I appreciate from my parents that they raised me to make my own decisions and live with the consequences of the decisions from a very early age, both good and bad. And that's what really brought me to make my own decision to forego college and go to Israel.
Mm-hmm. You heard Kayla say that when she first said to her mother, when she was 13, one day I'm going to live in Israel, her mother sort of poo-pooed it a little bit. When you ultimately decide to go to Israel and indicate to your parents it's going to be your home, how did they, as American Jews, feel?
Funnily enough, they were actually extremely supportive. They were actually extremely happy with the decision. They told me when I was 18 that it was time to live my own life, that I can do whatever I wish in order to create a life for myself, but it has to be outside of the house. That it is now on me to create that life, to follow my own path and make those decisions to whatever end.
What are your parents' names?
David and Karen.
Where are they from?
My father, David, is from King of Prussia, outside of Philadelphia, and my mother is from Long Island.
Okay, so they're both born in America.
Yes, I'm a third-generation American.
Very nice. How did your parents feel when you said to them, no, I'm not a 13-year-old just talking now, and you're going to be an ocean away from them? As Zionist as they were, how'd they feel?
So there were a few steps since I was 13. There was a major event that really kind of drove it home for me, that this isn't somewhere in the clouds. This is something that I must do. I was on the March of the Living, and after experiencing that, and after having been in all the camps, and been in Israel for its 60th Independence Day, it was just something that I said to myself, it's happening. And the reaction, not only from my parents, but from their friends, was, oh, she saw a cute boy in uniform. It'll pass. And I said, no, I'm going to be the cute one in a uniform now. So it's happening. And they were very proud and maybe even a little jealous. But it's hard. It's hard to let your baby go.
It sure is.
So they'd be happier if it was the neighbor's kid.
Okay. Yeah. But it's so interesting you use the word jealous, because part of them wanted to be you.
Absolutely. I totally believe that to this day.
Do you understand what Kayla means?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I was supposed to be born in Israel originally. My parents had everything planned out, and then the Gulf War started and broke out, and there were Scud missiles falling, and my mom said, hold up, we're not going. My baby is not going to be born into an oxygen tent. And so I ended up in Israel eventually, just 18 years later.
Amazing. Okay, both. As I listen to you and experience you, I'm wondering to myself, how American do you feel? Because, when I look at you, I see two American Jews who made Aliyah. But I don't know what it is inside you. I don't know how you experience your own identity. Are you still an American Jew, Kayla? Do you know what I mean?
I think so. I'm not sure that the answer is very black and white. I'm Jewish, first and foremost, and I come from a very multicultural background. I am American, I am Israeli, I hold both passports, and to me it's not just a piece of paper. I do take pride in both of those identities. You know, and what does that mean to be American? Do I get excited to go get Dunkin' Donuts when I fly in? Of course I do.
Does it feel like home? Because you said when you went to Israel, you felt a sense of home you never had here.
Yeah.
Is there anything about home for you here?
My family. But it's hard for me to bring myself to say that this is home. So
there are American styles
mm-hmm.
for a young girl growing up and then becoming a teenager. There are American styles. It's not identical to being an Israeli teenager. No. You know what I mean? Okay. In terms of your self-identity,
mm-hmm.
where are you in terms of I'm an Israeli girl, I'm an American girl? Are you an American girl who now lives in Israel?
I don't think so. And
right.
I made it a point for me not to be. When I moved to Israel, I started out in Beersheba actually, and I really put myself as far into Israeli culture as I possibly could because I didn't want to have an accent when I spoke in Hebrew.
And you don't?
I'm told that I don't.
Very good for you. And you're perfectly fluent in Hebrew.
I'm fluent in Hebrew. I study in Hebrew. I have Israeli friends. That doesn't mean that I don't have American friends.
Yeah.
But I wanted to be as at home as possible. I'm still a new immigrant because I don't necessarily know my way, to this day, unfortunately, I don't know my way around bureaucracy as well as the average Israeli. There are certain aspects of life where I do feel that I'm still an immigrant, but I do feel at this point more Israeli than I do American.
Okay, same question for you.
Sure. So for me, I definitely identify as an Israeli. I'm always, on some level, going to be American. Unfortunately, unlike Kayla, I have not mastered the accent, and I've been repeatedly told so. And for a while, that actually really bothered me because I worked extremely hard to be as Israeli as possible, get the chutzpah, like the hard shell, the sabra attitude, and it just never worked. I'm a kid from the suburbs of New Jersey. It's not in me. But I will say that I identify with and appreciate much more having assimilated into Israeli society and culture and that personality into myself much more than, well, I'm an American living in Israel. For me, I'm Israeli, and I'm proud to be Israeli. And I also appreciate the fact that there are some parts of my personality that are still American because it's the best of both worlds, I think.
How interesting. Okay, I want you to identify the difference. Because it's a fascinating insight. There are parts of you still feel are American, and parts of you that you feel now are Israeli.
Yeah.
For our audience that is listening to you and fascinated, try to define which are which.
Okay. So in Israel, you have to be tough. You have to be no nonsense. You have to be very direct. And so that part of my personality, I think, is very Israeli. Especially when I come home, I found that if I ever get into a discussion with my friends about any sort of contentious topic, people can even get offended. And it's not that I intended to. It's just I'm very much more direct than I used to be. And American in that, obviously, the accent. But I think that, I don't know, it's tough to define myself as an American now. It's much more Israeli. But I think it's just being able to take a step away from that very harsh exterior and be, I don't know, there's a sort of empathy and openness in Americans that sometimes doesn't always come across with Israelis, at least immediately. So I think that part of my personality is something that I appreciate having had from birth and having learned here.
Well, this may not be fair to you because I'm only meeting you for the first time. There's something very soft and gentle about you. Is that just because we're at this table? If I knew you outside this table, would I use the word soft and gentle about you?
Well, it actually depends on the situation. I can definitely be extremely exuberant and absurdly loud. But at the same time, it's just as easy to talk softly because it's all in context. Like, you don't always need to shout and scream and be jubilant about everything, and sometimes it's much easier to speak and get your point across and speak calmly, and that's, I think, something that, especially in this program, has been absolutely instrumental because For me, talking with people who are pro-Palestinian or anti-Israel, they can shout at me, they can curse at me, or do whatever aggressive action that they wish, but as long as I keep calm and explain myself and don't allow myself to get riled up and take the bait, then everyone around me, everyone who's listening, who isn't necessarily on that area, who aren't pro-Israel, anti-Israel, pro-Palestinian, they're on the fence. Those people can listen and see, hey, this guy is calm. This guy wants to talk. This guy isn't there to try to force his point across to people. And I think that's something that is a blend of both the Israeli and the American personality.
How would you answer the same question? There are parts of you that still may be shaped more by an American experience than an Israeli experience. Are there ways in which you see the same thing that Josh sees? There's both in you?
Absolutely. And again, I even have this third element in my identity because I was raised in a Russian disciplined home. So, and I think Josh brings up an excellent point by saying that it's all contextual. So if there are certain situations where I feel that I have to get my point across and that warrants some sort of, maybe aggression isn't the best word to use in this context, but yeah, to stand up for myself and say what I think, then when I was 18, I don't think I would be able to do that as much because I was too soft and too gentle. Mm-hmm. So I've learned to be a bit tougher. So that's definitely the Israeli influence. But in different situations, I think it's important to stand in line and wait your turn. And that's a concept that's very foreign to Israelis, whether it's at the supermarket or anywhere else. So having that ability to juggle and to be able to use that camouflage, to be able to approach the audience, to be able to speak to different audiences. And I think that's really what builds bridges, being able to identify your audience and being able to speak to them. So,
how old are you now?
I'm 26.
How old are you now?
Same, 26.
Okay. So you served in the IDF. Mm-hmm. Where did you serve and what was it like?
I served in the Karakal Battalion, which is a combat unit where men and women serve together. There's no hierarchy based on gender. We are completely equal. We did all the same missions together. I had soldiers that were male and female.
Where were you stationed?
We were stationed on the Egyptian border, all along the Egyptian border.
Okay. Was it quiet when you were there?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry. What happened?
No, it was exciting.
Okay.
To the naked eye, it seems quiet because it's the open desert. And it would seem like, oh, what are you even doing here? What's the point? And unfortunately, Sinai has become a terrorist hub. And as strong as our peace agreement is with Egypt, it's become a very problematic area. If in the past a lot of contraband came through on that border, where contraband starts, that turns into guns and that turns into people. And you need to understand what kind of people are coming in and what their intentions are. And we were the first line to see these things coming in and these people coming in and having to deal with that.
I don't know the technical phrase. Mm-hmm. What I imagine is combat is when two armies face off against each other. But there's something other than combat that means you're in action of some kind. Mm-hmm. So I'm assuming you were not in combat but in action. Is that fair? Or would you describe it?
I think it's a fair distinction, yeah.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. Were you ever frightened?
Yes, but I think the moment that I was most frightened, and I'll never forget it, I had finished commander's course. It's a 4-month-long course. And
I'm sorry, that was your rank? What's it mean, commander's course?
Once I was finished, I was a squad commander. I had about 10 soldiers under my command. And then I was promoted to staff sergeant. And I had about 30 soldiers under my command, along with 3 squad commanders. That's how I was released out of the Army. And I remember that moment. It was a very Jewish mama moment, where I was minutes away from getting my soldiers. and being introduced to them and them seeing me for the first time, and I freaked out. And I didn't have a moment like that before in the Army. Not when I got my gun, not when I had to shoot my gun, none of it. And I remember calling my parents and saying, I don't know what I'm going to do. I have to make sure that they eat, I have to make sure that they sleep, I have to know who their parents are, I have to know it all. And what if I fail them? And that was a moment where I understood that I'm responsible for each and every one of their lives. And I think that was the most frightening moment in my entire service.
How interesting. How did it go finally?
It went great. I'm still in touch with a lot of my soldiers, and you know, we all make mistakes along the way, and it's a learning experience. And but in the end, I learned so much from them, and it was just wow.
What we understand is that the IDF, in some way, that's the melting pot for the state of Israel. That's where people from every community, every religious background, in essence, olim from all over the world end up together and learn about each other. That's what we understand to be true. Is that a fair assessment from your perspective?
Absolutely. Where I served, at least from my personal experience, I can tell you that I met people from all walks of life. I mean, from, sorry, but middle of nowhere, Arad, to diplomatic Herzliya, fancy schmancy, and everything in between. Olim from the States, from Russia, from Ukraine, from South Africa. We were all in one unit. And again, these are people who I would, at least half of them, would have never voluntarily met. And I think we were all better for it. And again, to this day, some of us are still very, very good friends.
That's lovely. And how did they feel about the fact that they were commanded by a woman?
I take great pride in saying that I think the IDF is way beyond any other army in the world when it comes to bringing women into all sorts of different positions. And if at first certain soldiers are not so comfortable with it, in the end, I think they become better and stronger people for it.
And what about the argument you hear in America all the time, that a woman simply does not have the strength of a man, and there are instances where strength matters, and therefore a woman is not only at a disadvantage, but she may be in some way holding back or being a weight on male soldiers who now have to not only worry about themselves, but have to worry about a weaker woman soldier.
Well, not to be too blunt, but I think that's ridiculous. First of all, if a soldier is only worrying about themselves, then they're a bad soldier, male or female, first of all. And second of all, again, as far as integrating female soldiers in different positions in the IDF, I mean, they're not stupid, right? They're not going to put them in a place where it's going to take a toll on the mission. If the mission is appropriate for a female to be there, then they're going to do it. And I mean, I'm walking proof. And I carried my own vest and my own gun and my own ammunition and my own food and so on and so forth. There are certain positions where it is too sensitive or it's not appropriate because it doesn't fit the mission. But if it does, then what's the problem?
Beautifully said. So you're the guy.
All right. Okay. Yeah, I'm the guy.
As Kayla describes it, do you think she's describing it accurately?
Absolutely. I actually just want to add on to what she was talking about. My cousin was accepted into the first enlistment into the Special Forces in the artillery unit in the Army to be in the Special Forces there. And she succeeded. She went through basic training and advanced training, and she's a fully fledged combat soldier in the Israeli Special Forces. And I think it's a testament to the fact that there's no rhyme or reason that a woman who is determined, who is capable, is unable to do the same job that a man can.
Mm-hmm. So where were you? What unit were you in, and where were you stationed?
So I served in the olim. It's codenamed Diamond. It's the Special Operations Engineering Unit. It's the unit in charge of the demolition of terror tunnels, as well as the disposal of improvised explosive devices and anti-personnel lines. as well as explosives in general. I was there in an intelligence capacity, and due to the nature of what I was doing, it's not something that we can talk about too much. But I will say that I was in combat originally in the combat engineers. I was injured. I lost the use of my right arm.
What happened?
I was in the middle of training, doing a crawl. I started to feel like intense pain in my arm. It went numb. And I had 2 months where I barely had any function. Doctors said that I would never have full function. Doctors said I would never lift any weight over my head. And I was basically resigned to the fact that I was going to have some backwater job, and that's what they pushed on me. They said, oh, you can go be an administrative assistant. And I told them no. I said, no, I won't. I fought to do something that mattered. I fought to make sure that I could feel like I was making a difference, that my Army service was doing something for me and for Israel. And so I ended up, through fighting it, I ended up in intelligence in Yalom.
Good for you. Was it an accident that happened to you?
Yes, absolutely. It was.
It wasn't no bullet hit
No,
you?
no, 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 no. It was nothing so serious. It was simply during a certain training exercise. We were just. You're always pushing, always pushing. The beauty of the Army is that I think it breaks you down in order to build you up from the most basic to make you the best person and soldier you can be. And unfortunately, during that process, sometimes there's some bad luck, and I unfortunately had some of it.
Mm-hmm. You seem, though, to have dealt with it emotionally very well.
Absolutely. I pushed myself through physical therapy. I started going into powerlifting and fitness, and I made it my goal to prove all those doctors wrong.
Thank you.
By
the way, I have shaken your hand. There's no weakness in your shake.
Yeah, luckily through a lot of consistent training in physical therapy, it has not affected me whatsoever, and in fact, it's improved.
Happy for you. Okay. One more question about the IDF. There's this flap now that American Jews hear all the time, that there's a growing presence of Orthodox control in Israeli life in general. And one of the places where it manifests itself is whether in the IDF women can sing. Have you heard about this?
I'm asked about it all the time because of the nature of my service. Recently, a rabbi has gone out and spoken against women serving in the Army, specifically in combat positions and specifically in the unit that I served. So it's something that definitely comes up a lot.
As an Israeli now, what's your reaction?
I think it's just awful. I mean, he went so far as to say that the women that do service like I did are no longer Jewish when they come out, and they're not so much women anymore either. I have a very good friend that I was in commander's course with. She is very much a woman. She is a religious Jew. She's very observant. And she met her husband in officer's course. So she was a captain when she was released. And I think there's no room for it. And putting it under this cover of, religion, it's inappropriate. When it's possible to respect all sides involved, whether it's kashrut or Shabbat on base, then I say by all means, and I say that as someone who isn't very observant. But when it goes so far as to disrespect, in this example, women, there's no room for it, and there shouldn't be.
So you're a guy. What do you think of all?
Guy.
What do you think of it?
I think it's absolutely ridiculous. I think that, again, saying that someone can't do something or they're a lesser person or lesser of a Jew because they chose to push themselves to serve in combat, to serve in certain roles that women can't sing is absolutely ridiculous. And I don't think everyone has a right to say their opinion, but I don't think it's a valid one at all. I think that I appreciate even more women who actually push themselves to do that, who fight and are in combat units and serve alongside men, and they prove him wrong. And the fact that he believes that women don't have a place in combat or singing, it's a fallacy.
Okay. Are the people you're with in Israel, do they care about this? Or is it I sometimes worry that issues are bigger in American Jewry than they are for Israelis. That is, there are some issues which Americans take very, very seriously, and Israelis just don't care at all. To what extent, if I were with you and your friends, and this ever came up, To what extent would it ever come up, and to what extent would it make you angry, or is it just nonsense you don't care about?
So, as someone studying in the field of government, I can tell you that one of our favorite things is to argue. And so these
Jewish thing.
Oh, absolutely. And these kinds of things do come up. It really depends on like the different groups. Like, yes, there are Israelis who might not pay as much attention to this, and there are also groups who pay a great deal of attention to this and speak out against this. It all really depends. My personal group, we do. We talk about these kind of contentious
what do you
issues.
say?
We all agree as one that there's no room for this kind of talk. We're in a world which is becoming more and more tolerant.
Okay, it's more than talk, though. In Israel, there's a certain control held by ultra-Orthodox parties, given the nature of the parliamentary system, where a small party can end up with a disproportionate amount of power because they are needed in the coalition government. And as a result, at the moment, Orthodox parties control certain aspects of what's called family life in the state of Israel. So, for example, you have a lovely girlfriend. If you wanted to get married, you could not be married except by in essence, a rabbi who's part of the state system. An Orthodox rabbi is part of the state system. It's not likely to be a rabbi you have a relationship with, or a rabbi who represents a stream of Judaism that you're comfortable with. To what extent would you care? Would your girlfriend care? Would your friends care? How much do you care about this?
I think religious life in Israel as a Jewish and democratic state is an intrinsic part of it. And for me, even though I might not follow that certain sect or follow that certain line of thinking or beliefs in such a stringent aspect of Judaism, I think there's a beauty in it. I think that there is definitely a way to, within that system, find a happy medium. I have a friend who just got married, and he found an Orthodox rabbi who is wonderful. He's an American Jew. He's so passionate, such a wonderful singing voice, and it made the wedding absolutely fantastic. So yes, is there the issue that it's only an Orthodox rabbi that can make a wedding? At this point, yes, but at the same time, there's absolutely a way that you can be happy and content within that.
Okay, so it doesn't sound like it enrages you.
No, I
Okay.
don't think that it enrages me.
Would you answer the same way or differently? When you consider the fact that if you and your boyfriend want to get married one day, you can't be married except by a rabbi who comes out of the official Orthodox establishment. Some Orthodox rabbis aren't even permitted to marriages in Israel. It's amazing. But I want to know to what extent do you sort of take Josh's view, or to what extent does it make you angry?
I'm going to start by saying, because you asked previously about how American Jewry and Israeli Jews approach this topic, I think American Jews have a really hard time with this concept that it's a Jewish state, right? Because it's so in our blood to think separation of church and state. And all of a sudden, when it kind of gets mixed up, that's kind of like a shock effect, right? We kind of start to twitch. So for me, I think it's a beautiful thing that we do have this Jewish identity, and it is part of the state. In the beginning, it was a foreign concept to me. And I think we still have a long ways to go to define what that means, because I can define what it means to be a Jew very differently than you, or definitely the Rabbanut. And it's an uphill battle, and I think that a lot of people feel misrepresented or not represented at all by the Rabbanut. But I think more and more we are seeing different sects coming in and gaining more and more power, and there are alternatives to being married within the Rabbanut. So if that's something that someone doesn't want, there are loopholes.
Okay. You were a sergeant in the IDF.
Mm-hmm.
You led, I think you said you had 30 soldiers under your command.
Mm-hmm.
You are obviously a competent, thoughtful Jew. Although you can be a sergeant in the IDF, you cannot go to the Western Wall and read from the Torah. Does that bother you?
Me personally, no, because I grew up in a community where that wasn't an issue.
Because you were in an Orthodox community here in America.
Right. I can understand why it would
Does
bother
it
others.
offend you intellectually as an Israeli?
No.
Okay, and if I talk to your
Simply
friends,
put.
and a lot of your friends would not have had your background,
Mm-hmm.
if I talk to your Israeli friends, your age,
Mm-hmm.
your experience, IDF, whatever, do you think they, by and large, have your approach?
I think so. Even the non-religious ones, and I'll tell you why. There's purely Israeli, right? Not American Israeli, not second generation, purely Israelis. I think the secular ones, at least, are very much of this mind that I don't go to synagogue, but the synagogue that I don't go to, it's going to be Orthodox. So this idea of Aliyah Torah and females reading from the Torah, it's kind of foreign to them as well. So it's not such a burning issue for them. So I do think that my guesstimate is that they would agree with me that
Do
it's
you,
not an issue.
you think Kayla is right?
So for me, I'm actually going to take a little different tack. Coming from a conservative background and having seen and enjoyed and appreciated women praying, having even a female rabbi, hearing them pray, read the Torah, I think that it's something that we need to work towards, and we are. There is a bill in the Knesset that was passed that is currently going through the readings that is to allow women of the wall to openly read Torah and pray and chant. And I've seen them. I've seen the women of the wall, and it is absolutely beautiful. I think that everyone has a right in Israel, our Jewish state, to pray and to appreciate God as they will. I don't think that anyone should tell them exactly who can and can't and how and when. And I think that this is a one step in some progress that Israel is making in becoming more accepting of different denominations. I have a great deal of friends who come from a similar background, and similarly they share that kind of not idealism, but the same kind of appreciation for egalitarianism. And so it is an issue that we've discussed at length. It is an issue that we've talked about and tried to strategize and try to understand how and where and why it can move in the direction that we think would be productive and
Okay.
beneficial.
One more question for you both in this area. So much of the problem that we're discussing now comes from the political system, where again, a small party can have disproportionate power because it's necessary for the coalition. Among people your age, do you ever hear a discussion that the political system, the parliamentary system, should be changed, and a more American type system where you have parties, 2 parties, maybe even 3 parties, but that's it, and they run against each other, and ultimately you avoid the problems created by a coalition government? Is that something I would hear discussed among you and your friends at your age?
Among my friends, absolutely. Like I said, we're political science majors, so this is our bread and butter. It's a huge issue. I think that...
Is there a chance it'll happen?
Is there a chance that it'll happen, that things will change? I think so. I think that as Israeli society diversifies and modernizes slowly, as the people change and as life around us changes, that so too will the system, so too will the standards. And I think that, yes, I think it will change in time.
What do you think? First of all, if I were with you and your friends, is the fact that the system has to be changed politically, the process, not that you're upsetting with the politicians, it's a process.
All right.
Would I hear that ever discussed among you and your friends?
Absolutely. That was a huge issue going back to the last elections. And I'm not a political science major, but I do study law and government. So it's definitely a topic of conversation. I will say this. I don't know what the future holds in terms of what system we will have. It's Israel, you can never know. We can only tell you what happened. But we're less than 70 years old. It's a baby. It's still figuring it out. So I think changes have, I don't think, it's a fact, changes have been made. You need a higher percentage to be able to be considered a party worthy of being put on the ballot.
Correct.
I think that's a step in the right direction, and we're still in a process, right? We don't have as a state, we don't have this long legacy of like the States has. So I do expect changes. I can't say what they will or should be quite yet.
I want you to know, I would continue this line of discussion, hearing from you, talk about what Israeli life is like, having had an American perspective, and now you both are obviously Israeli. And so it's so interesting, and I just, part of me says just stay on this, but I really do want to talk about BDS and what you're trying to do here. And I also am fascinated to know how you experience it. Again, you're American kids who grew up in America, and now you're Israeli. And the BDS movement was not nearly what it was as you were growing up, in terms of what it is now. Mm-hmm. And you've come back to America with a mission. You're part of the Gideon Project through Reservists on duty. Your task is now to go on, I believe, college campuses and engage with Jewish students and those who are supportive of BDS. Mm-hmm. And I want to talk about that for a few minutes. And I want to know, your experiences, but before your experiences, I want to know what your own orientation is. Josh, just an emotional/intellectual response.
Sure.
What's your attitude towards the BDS movement as an expression of something inside America and really now inside Europe as well?
I think the easiest way to describe it would be disappointment. I think that the purporting of misinformation and lies and half-truths and distortions that are the bread and butter of this movement have created a situation where this kind of movement that is blatantly anti-Israel, if not by nature or by how they describe themselves, and people can flock to it. It's a human rights movement. It's pro-Palestinian. It's for them. But at the same time, when you really look and go into their mantra, what the core belief system that they have that surrounds them and their supporters with, it's free hate. And that is not constructive. That is destructive. That is contrary to what we need. What we need is dialogue. What we need is for both sides, for people who are both pro-Israel and pro-Palestinian, and everyone in between, to discuss this in a natural and open and honest dialogue about the issues that they see that are blockades to peace, blockades to progress, instead of shouting matches and mudslinging from across the aisle.
Mm-hmm. Same question for you, and you've heard how Josh answers it. Mm-hmm. I want to know whether you would use the word lies as well, but in general, what's your attitude towards the phenomenon of BDS?
So I would say that I definitely agree with Josh that there is a nucleus here that started this movement, and I think its core is really anti-Semitism. And now it has a new fancy name. It's called AntiIsrael, right? Because now we have a state to attack. And we're going to cover it up with another name, and we're going to call it pro-Palestinian, and we're going to be for human rights, and we're going to make it sound really nice and bubbly. And I think that's the core, right? But then the bigger problem is that you have students, which is our target audience, flocking to this nucleus that really just don't know.
Why do they flock?
Right? Because of the selling point, right? If I was 18 years old, stepping onto a college campus, just leaving my parents' house, just leaving the nest, I want to do good in the world, right? And if I'm being told about, these innocent people that are suffering at the hands of this awful oppressor, and I know nothing about it because what is Israel? Some dot somewhere all the way over there on the other side of the world. Then yeah, that sounds really good to me. I want to hear more. I'm going to take that flyer. I'm going to sign up for a lecture, and maybe I'm going to hold up a sign next time, right? But I don't have the facts. And luckily, the facts are on our side. And that's what we're here to do, to bring the facts to the table and to have an open discussion with those people who have been misguided.
What is, from your perspective, motivating those who are the organizers of BDS on college campuses? What's their goal?
I don't think it's a far reach to say the destruction of the state of Israel. I think that is their end goal. I think that they have covered it up, like I said, by saying that this is pro-something. And it's really not. It's really anti-Israel.
Do you agree with Kayla that it's that simple?
It is. I think that at the end of the day, BDS, SJP, JVP, all these organizations, their goal is delegitimization. Their goal is to make Israel a pariah, to make Israel not a legitimate state that's recognized by the UN, not a legitimate state that is a leader and innovator in technology, but an oppressor. And in that, they have the emotion, they have the plight on their side, and use that through the distortion, like I said before, in order to sway people who aren't necessarily on one side or the other.
You know, I was recently at Colombia where Ambassador Danny Danon spoke. And there were pro-Palestinian in the auditorium. They were very organized. They were scattered throughout the entire room. And every 3 minutes, another group would get up and try to interrupt them and scream and hold placards. And their mantra was, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. That is transparently anti-Israel. It's not the West Bank should be free. It's not a Palestinian state should be free. It's from the river to the sea. That is Eretz Yisrael. That is the current state of Israel. And I'm watching, this is Colombia. These are not stupid people. I'm saying to myself, why isn't it clear to everyone that if those who are supporting BDS are chanting from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, that it isn't exactly what the two of you are saying? An attempt to delegitimize, and I agree with you, to destroy, to eliminate the state of Israel as an existing sovereign entity that is a member state of the United Nations. I'm asking you, you're closer in age, and now you've been dealing with this. Why isn't this transparent to any young person, Jew or non-Jew, on the college campus?
I think I have a two-point answer to that. Anti-Semitism has been around forever. No one's inventing the wheel, right? We're just calling it something different. And unfortunately, it's never gone out of style. It goes up and down, it becomes more popular, less popular, but it's always there.
Okay, but are you suggesting that in some way this movement is tapping into an anti-Semitic streak inside of college kids?
I'm not suggesting it. That is flat out what I'm saying.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, and one of the things that bothers us the most, us, is that there are so many Jewish kids. There are kids wearing yarmulkes, kippot, at Columbia, who are there to give Danny Danon grief. And Danny Danon was fabulous, the ambassador from Israel to the United States. And he kept saying to these groups, I know you're going to get up. Don't get up. I mean, you disagree with, stay.
Please stay for the Q&A. I want to listen to you. I want to listen to your questions. I want to answer them. I want to engage with you. Maybe you will convince me. So please, I don't know. I see a group here, maybe another one up there. So decide, at least leave one group here. I promise to finish in 10 minutes.
Ask me questions. Tell me what bothers you. Let me have a chance to answer you. But don't walk out. None of them stayed. Every single group walked out. And I'm looking at kids who are Jewish kids, who are sympathetic to from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Are you suggesting in some way, because we know it's true, that there is some kind of weird self-hatred here, and that you have in Jewish kids anti-Semitism? Because I'm not sure that's what's being tapped into, as opposed to what you said to begin with. I'm 18, I'm liberal, I'm idealistic, and I hear that Israel, my people, are being oppressive. and therefore I have a responsibility, a Jewish responsibility,
Tikkun olam,
to keep, right, Tikkun Olam trumps everything.
right?
Okay, so what do you think?
So I think it's a mix of both. I think for those same Jewish students that you brought up, it's definitely that. It is the Tikkun Olam. It is the, my grandparents came out of the camps. I have an obligation to help all those in need. And once again, when they're being sold this really convenient, nice package of, hey, just hold up this poster and we're all for human rights, then who wouldn't do that? What self-respecting person who believes, like you said, in liberalism and helping the ones in need wouldn't sign up to that? And again, I think they're being misled. I think they're being misinformed. They don't know the facts. So most of these people have never been to Israel, right? It reminds me, if I can just tell you a short story. When I was in high school, I went to a public school. And I made it a point to not forget my Jewish identity. So any chance I had, I kind of would bring up conversation or do something that would kind of force people to ask questions. And when I made the decision to come to Israel after high school, my very well-educated friends, like you say, they went off to study at Columbia, Stanford, and all the Ivy Leagues, very innocently asked me, well, how are you getting to school? I mean, are there cars in Israel? Right? And these are, we're not talking about godforsaken places. We're, really well-educated people who are coming from good families, and they just don't know. So that's why we're here, to bring the facts and to open up a dialogue to those who are willing to.
Mm-hmm. So what do you try? What's the message? And I want some details here. Okay. What do you try to do? I think both of you have described the problem so well, and I tend to think the way you've said it is exactly right. I believe this is anti-Semitism. I believe it's clear that what we want here is not Palestinian rights in and of themselves, but we don't want Jews to have a Jewish sovereignty over any piece of what was once Muslim territory, and you just shouldn't be here at all. Okay, and you hear how Kayla describes it. So what's you use the word lies. What's the lie, and what do you try to do? Because you're seen already as somebody who has you're a biased. Yeah. You're an Israeli. Not that you're one of the bad guys. You're an IDF. You're the Israeli soldier. You're the guy who goes into Ramallah and takes Palestinians out of bed in the middle of the night in front of their children and their grandchildren. You're the bad guy. You're the one who, at checkpoints, humiliate Palestinians. All they want to do is go from here to there. And you big Israeli soldier, you too. I know, I'm very scary. Yeah. Oh. By the way, I don't want to run into you with your flak jacket and your gun. But you understand, this is what you get. You are the bad guys. And so you're coming in, it seems to me, I've always wondered, I've never asked it this way, you almost come in with a disadvantage. You're not seen as somebody who is, objective, nonpartisan. You're part of the problem. So what do you say?
So first of all, I don't see it as a disadvantage at all. I see it as an advantage, and I'll tell you why. It's threefold. First of all of these people who are getting these facts from pamphlets and their teachers or whatever their source is, most of them have never met an Israeli soldier. They've never met a person who grew up next to them in the next town over. They never heard a story of what it's like to live in Israel, what it's like to go through your first red alert in Israel and see a rocket hit 20 meters from you. None of those things are things that they've ever heard about or experienced. They have a certain specific narrative that they have been force-fed or willingly fed. And that's all they know. And so first of all, it's my own personal experience that I bring. And I'm not trying to convince anyone to be pro-Israel. I'm not trying to say, oh, so you should now believe me and forget about that. No. We're here to offer the facts, offer our own experiences.
So give me an example of a fact.
Okay.
By the way, I wouldn't believe you.
Oh, I'm sure.
If I were a student at Columbia and you came and told me you were not there to try to convince me to be pro-Israel, I wouldn't believe you. Why should I believe you? Is that true, by the way? Is that true? You're going on campus and you don't want to convince people to be pro-Israel? Is that true? You don't?
No, because this is an apolitical organization. Our goal.
Of course you do.
No.
Do you?
I think our goal is to make people think. And like
Yeah.
I mentioned before, the facts just happen to be on our side.
Yeah.
Okay,
Right.
give me some facts.
Okay, so let's go for one of the most contentious and commonly spoken about issues, apartheid. Apartheid is defined as institutionalized racism. That is something that happened in South Africa, and it was a horrendous experience. In Israel, let's just go by the numbers, one of the main Supreme Court justices is an Arab. The head of the Home Front Command is also an Arab. The head of the police force was an Arab. In addition, Arabs have full rights under Israeli sovereignty. They are full citizens. They can vote. In fact, in the government, the third largest party in the Knesset is actually a group of Arabs. They are all part of government. They are part of daily life. They are not treated as second-class citizens. There are issues with minorities, as in every democratic state. There are always issues. There's always, but like Kayla said, we're a 70-year-old country. There are growing pains. There are challenges. These are things that need to be worked on, but it is not an apartheid state, even just by the definition of it in and of itself.
Okay, can I be the kid?
Sure.
Okay. I just read that Israel does not allocate the same amount of funds for Arab villages inside Israel as for Jewish villages, Jewish cities. That there is institutionalized discrimination against Arab Israelis. They don't have the same water rights. They don't have the same educational system. And while you say, you know, are they citizens? Okay, I know they can vote. And like every place, every now and then there's an unusual individual who's part of a minority group. So you have an Arab Israeli who's head of the Supreme Court. But you wouldn't want to be Arab, an Arab Israeli. You wouldn't want to be a Palestinian Israeli living inside Israel, because you would not be treated by the government or the system the same way a Jewish Israeli would.
So first of all, the statistics about how they're like less educated or have less access to water, they're false. In fact, in the Middle East, Palestinians and Israeli Arabs have the highest per capita of the number of highly educated individuals. There are 42 centers of higher learning in the West Bank. They have full access to water. Israel is sending in thousands of tons of supplies for infrastructure. There are billions of dollars being sent in aid, even more so than is being sent to all the other refugees in all over the world. And in addition, and especially for the Palestinians are not under Israeli jurisdiction. They are under the Palestinian Authority's jurisdiction.
On the West Bank.
In the West Bank. And in Gaza, they are under Hamas, which is a official recognized terrorist organization. So to say that Israeli Arabs, like I said, have full rights, they are full Israelis, there are basic laws, constitutional rights that give them the right to privacy, that give them the right to property. These are things that they have brought to court. There are Israeli Arabs, there are Palestinians who have brought these things to court, and they have won, because these are the laws. And there's no system of racism or favoritism. If you have a case, if you are an Israeli citizen, you will be treated by the laws fairly, regardless if you're Christian or Arab or Druze or Baha'i, it doesn't matter. The point is that there are laws in place, and Israel has those laws to protect them.
Do you disagree with Josh in any way?
No, and I will go one step further and say that to that same student, I would say, first of all, I would love to read more about what you're saying, because that bothers me as an Israeli. But from my personal experience, I would have to disagree. I can tell you that within the framework of my studies, I volunteer at a high school in Yafo, which is 99.9% Muslim Arab. There is one student who is Christian. And not only is the funding similar, if not identical, to other schools in Yafo or in Tel Aviv, their culture and the language is very much respected, to the point where any sort of banner that you walk by is in Arabic and not in Hebrew. And they have Palestinian collective memory plastered on the walls, which is very different than something else that would be taught in a predominantly Jewish school. So not only is it equal rights, but there's a certain respect for the culture and traditions that Arab Israelis hold dear to them.
Okay.
I just want to add to that briefly,
Sure.
sorry. There's also, similar to in America, that there's affirmative action, that there is active efforts to help minorities to be able to go to school, be able to achieve like higher education. These are the same things that are in Israel. There are active efforts in order to ensure that members, Israeli Arabs, Palestinians, Arab Christians, that they are also able to ensure that they can have education the same as their Israeli neighbors.
Okay. So how come the Israeli army is free anytime it wants to go into a Palestinian village or city, even if it's under Palestinian control? It's under the PA. Israel retains the right to go in and police if they believe there's somebody there of danger to the state of Israel. So I don't know, I don't know if you personally were ever stationed on the West Bank. I don't know if you were at Hebron, I don't know if you were at Ramallah, but if you were, you could have been an Israeli soldier who went into somebody's house in the middle of the night and pulled them out of bed in front of their wife, children, and grandchildren. Just like the Nazis did to the Jews in Germany. Aren't you aghast at that? What do you say?
I would say, first and foremost, I'm offended by the comparison to the Nazis. I think that is an unfair comparison.
Because?
Because you are talking about innocent civilians as opposed to combatants, even if they are suspected combatants. That's first and foremost. I think the comparison is completely not legitimate, and it's night and day. With that being said, I will take it back to my own experience of being a combat soldier and having to serve on the border and having to carry a gun. I am not a tomboy. I don't like guns. I think carrying a gun is a nasty thing, and I hate the fact that I had to do it. Did I do it? Yes. Do I take pride in the fact that I did it? Yes. Do I imagine and hope for a future where my children don't have to do that? Yes. I hate the fact that I have friends that had to wake people up in the middle of the night and have these situations where they have children waking up and women waking up. I don't blame them, though. It's not their fault. None of us want to do this. It is an awful situation, and we all hope for a day where we don't have to. But as soon as there is a necessity to protect our citizens and our civilians, and we see a posed danger or a threat to our security, then we're going to do what it takes. That's unfortunate, but it has to happen. There's a necessity for it.
And what about these checkpoints? Why do you humiliate Palestinians who just want to go from here to there? Why does Israel need to do that? And why does it do it in such a humiliating way?
Can you be more specific what humiliating means?
Well, a Palestinian wants to get to his farm, his olive orchard, and he has to go through a checkpoint. First of all, he has to stand in the sun for half an hour, just waiting on line. Then when he gets there, he's treated with a certain kind of disdain, and he's pushed around, and finally he's allowed to go through. Is that, how inhuman is that?
If I may, can I ask you a question? When was the last time you flew on a plane?
When I go on a plane, nobody is discourteous to me. I'm not being done, this doesn't happen to me because I'm non-American. I'm in the same situation that everybody is in. I understand why. And we go through the line, and it's not the same as a checkpoint on the West Bank.
I would argue that it is the same, and I would go further and argue that if you knew that one person, just one, on the plane didn't go through the security check and didn't go through the metal detector, I'm not so sure you'd be very quick to get on that same plane. Again, this is a necessity. Is it an inconvenience? Yes. Would I rather just get to my cafe after passport control and sit and have a drink? Absolutely. But I understand that it's a necessity. I hate walking on the cold floor in the middle of the airport. I hate having to take off my jacket in the middle of the winter and then having to put it back on and taking out my computer and putting it in. To me, that's inhumane. Is it a necessity? Yes. It's the same necessity that we experience in the West Bank.
And you're saying it's no different? What happens to the Palestinian at a checkpoint on the West Bank is no different than going through a security check at LaGuardia or JFK.
Absolutely. Again, there is a necessity. Doesn't mean that I am a personal threat, okay? It doesn't mean that anyone has any sort of information on who I am and what I want to do and why I want to fly to wherever it is I want to fly to. But it's a standard because we have a bigger threat to our security.
How would you answer the same question?
Basically the same way, but also I would add that it's not that only Palestinians are subjected to the checkpoints, and it's also Israelis. Israelis are subject to those same checkpoints. It's not like they pick and choose the Palestinian out of the lineup and say, you come here. No, it's everybody. Everyone who wants to leave the West Bank, Israeli or Palestinian, goes through these checkpoints, and they're unfortunate. But in the early 2000s, there was a string of hundreds of terror attacks that were done by some individuals in the West Bank, and the necessity to create a security barrier was raised. Is it unfortunate? Absolutely. Is it unfortunate that Israelis had to live in fear from terror attacks? Yes. Is it unfortunate that people have to feel like their lives are inconvenienced? Absolutely. But it's a necessary, it's a necessary step in order to ensure the safety of everyone in Israel.
And ever since, the number of terrorist attacks
It's gone down.
has been essentially zero up until last couple of years, where we've seen a completely different form of terrorist attacks. But no longer do we fear going on a bus, and no longer do we fear going with our families for a Passover vacation at a hotel.
Okay, then what about the occupation as a whole? Why is Israel occupying another people? Occupation in and of itself is inhumane, and it's brutalizing. It's not what people do in the 21st centuries. Why is Israel occupying another people?
So I would answer that in a few different ways. First of all, we have made countless attempts to come to the table and create a two-state solution. However, every time that we have attempted to do so, it has been either completely shot down, or we have to make concessions before even coming to the table, which no other country would ever agree to. So why is there a double standard all of a sudden for Israel? That's A. B, these are disputed territories, and saying that they are occupied under international law is, as long as the occupying force in those territories respects the law that was previously there and treats the citizens living there equally, then again, under international law, there is no problem. And that is exactly what Israel is doing. They're maintaining the equilibrium until a better solution is offered. And again, we have come to the table many times, and we have shown our readiness to pull out our civilians, as much as that is a painful process for us. We're ready to do it for peace. However, when the opposing side says, no, you have no right to exist, that's not a negotiation. That's not something that we can have a conversation about. And we're not willing to, and we won't.
Have the two of you been on college campuses yet?
Yes.
So what's your experience been?
Fortunately for me, my first experience on a college campus was at St. John's University. And they are a university that, until this point, has not seen a great deal of anti-Israel advocacy. So going there, we had a very receptive crowd, a very interested crowd to hear about what life in Israel is like. What is it like to be a lone soldier? What is a lone soldier? What's a kibbutz? What's an oleh hadash? And all of these things that basically allowed us to tell our stories without worrying so much about what kind of questions are they going to ask, like how do I answer this, how do I answer that? And they were also very, very interested, despite the fact that everyone was all pro-Israel. They all wanted to know about these things, and they were excited about it. And
That's lovely. That's lovely. Do you have a different experience?
So I unfortunately have not been on campuses yet.
Yes.
That's on the to-do list. I can tell you about our friends that are also part of the program that flew out to Berkeley last week.
Ooh.
Yeah, they had their work cut out for them, and they did a spectacular job.
How do you know?
From them telling us, from seeing pictures, from seeing videos.
And what did they describe?
It was funny. They came and just read off fun quotes that they came across the best, I mean, my personal favorite was, don't bore me with the facts, I don't care. Or I don't want to talk to you. A good one was, Israel supports ISIS and will bomb Syria until, just to make the war keep going. So again, that is not necessarily our target audience, people that just speak about blatant lies and, kind of a lost cause.
Good for you. What is your target audience?
So we call that the 5%. The 90% is our target audience. The people that just don't know, are kind of curious, think they know, but haven't really heard the other side, don't really know that there's another side. And we offer this dialogue, and those who are ready to come and hear, we've seen amazing results. I mean, the group that was in Berkeley, they told us that someone went up to them and said, listen, after hearing you speak, I thought I was really sure that I knew the deal and I know what's right, and now I'm kind of scratching my head and I'm not so sure. To us, that's a win.
That's a huge win, absolutely. Why is there no peace between Israel and Palestinians?
I think that it goes back to the same reason that is the basis of BDS and all of these organizations' existence. It's blind hate. It's generations of blind hate that's been perpetuated, and there's no end in sight as long as the side that the Hamas does not indoctrinate their kindergartners to be terrorists, that they aren't taught how to use an AK-47 from a very early age, that they aren't taught to hate Israel in schools. There needs to be an open and honest dialogue. There needs to be a sharing of history. There needs to be an understanding and a parting of the ways from this perpetuated hate, and a beginning or a stirring of acceptance of one another. And I think until that happens, the situation is going to continue.
Why is there no peace between Israel and the Palestinians?
In my opinion, we're ready. We're waiting for our partner to meet us at the table. That partner cannot be somebody who fundamentally disagrees with our existence. If you come up to me and say, I'm pro-Palestinian and I want my people, assuming I'm representing the Palestinians, to have a better life and to have whatever it is, then that's a conversation. I give more, you give less. That's something to talk about. But when the first sentence that comes out of someone's mouth is, you have no right to this land. You have no historic connection to this land. You don't belong here. Get out. There is no conversation to be had, and we won't have it. And we will not give up what is historically and rightfully ours.
Both of you made it sound as if the problem is with the Palestinians, that it's not a problem between Israelis and Palestinians. It's that the Palestinians, and let's say it this way, the Palestinian leadership at the moment refuses to acknowledge or recognize or accept the reality of a Jewish state, and that everything else is commentary. Do I understand both of you correctly?
Yes. When you have an organization like Hamas that in their charter calls for the destruction of Israel, calls for the destruction of a state, there's no partner to peace. When you have the Palestinian Authority whose leaders almost deify those who go and commit acts of terror, who pay these families who have people who have gone and stabbed Israelis, rammed Israelis, gone and hurt innocent civilians, when that is the mentality that one side has, there's no partner for peace. There's no room for discussion. And until that is not the reality, no progress can be made.
I'll add on to that and say that basically, yes, that you have understood us correctly. However, it's not black and white. Any conflict is messy, and no one here is perfect. We're not perfect either. And I think there's a lot to be discussed once we get to that table, and how that peace agreement will look, and what land belongs to who, and all these sort of elements have to be worked out. However, like I said, the starting point has to change, okay? You cannot have open dialogue with a person who doesn't want to have that dialogue with you. You can't force them into it. You can't break their arm and say, no, please talk to me. So that's the starting point. After that, will we have to make some certain concessions? Will the other side have to make certain concessions? Absolutely. But again, let's start. Let's talk. And I think it's a very good analogy, that same situation that happened at Berkeley when one of our friends came up to someone and said, hey, I want to talk to you. I want to tell you about my experience. I was there. They said, no, don't bother me with the facts. That's a problem. Mm-hmm. So how can we get to any sort of agreement if no, don't bother me?
Mm-hmm. I believe you both express it so perfectly well. I describe it as a human tragedy. There's no peace for one primary, fundamental reason, and you're right. If we get to the table, everything's up for grabs. But you'll never get to the table if one group says you have no right to be. And unfortunately, that is black and white. Because the State of Israel has never said to the Palestinians, you have no right to be. The Palestinians have said to the State of Israel, you have no right to be, you certainly have no right to be here, and you may not have any right to be. And I don't know if you ever get into this with the kids you talk to on campus. I don't understand how a liberal American Jew is sympathetic to a society where women are not free or equal, where gays are thrown off of buildings, and where there is a stated policy that a certain people will not be allowed to live anywhere inside the new land created for a Palestinian state. How in the world is a liberal Jew sympathetic to a regime that has that policy? It's not about individuals, but it is about a regime. And the regime at the moment does not want you, a Jew, to be anywhere from the river to the sea. And what bothers me, and I say this all the time here on JBS, I don't know why the American administrations, one after the other, doesn't get it. And why, whether it's Clinton or Bush or Obama or Trump, don't they understand that the problem is you guys and we as a people are confronting a regime that says we have no right to be, and nothing else can happen unless that changes. And I want that, I hope at some point you're able to also make that clear to anybody you talk to on a college campus, that it's not about a liberation movement. It's not. It's about an extermination movement. And it's a very hard thing. And we Jews are intrinsically, I hate the phrase tikkun olam for a whole bunch of reasons, but I understand the Jewish sensitivity and the Jewish liberal passion for justice and being good and for treating the stranger as the homeborn. That is such a fundamental Jewish notion. I know the Israeli people want to treat the Palestinian as the homeborn, but there was one prerequisite. The stranger can't want to kill me. If the stranger wants to kill me, I do not have the responsibility to treat that stranger as a homeborn. And when anybody talks about tikkun olam, they've got to add that. We will treat the stranger as the homeborn if they don't want to kill me. And at the moment, you guys are dealing with a human tragedy. Because, as you say, young people children are being taught to hate you. Do you hate Palestinians?
Not even remotely. I had a Palestinian doctor who saved my eye and part of my brain.
Not even remotely. Do you hate Palestinians?
Absolutely not. And I'll go further. I'll take it one step further and say, I'm pro-Palestinian. I want them to have a good life. I want my neighbors to have a good life. Are we going to be the best of friends one day?
It doesn't
Maybe.
matter. It doesn't
Hopefully.
matter.
I don't know. I don't have that answer. But I do want them to have a good life. And I think it is so unfortunate that Hamas and Fatah are the ones that are in charge of them, and they're responsible for the suffering that is going on in Gaza and in the West Bank. And it is unfortunate that, just like you said, it's a very small but important distinction between the leadership of the Palestinians and the average Palestinian who just wants to provide for his family, who, I do believe that at the end of the day, they also just want peace, because war is a big pain in the butt.
It is hell. It is hell. You saw it. It is hell. I wish you every success. I wish you kol tuva hatzlacha in all you do, not only here as part of Amit Deri's Reservists on Duty and the Gideon Project. I hope everything you do in life brings you success and real fulfillment and happiness. I hope if I'm ever in Israel, if Ruth and I are ever in Israel, we get to meet you.
You're welcome for Shabbat.
Absolutely.
You have to come
Anytime.
over for Shabbat.
Sweetheart,
Of
I would love
course.
that so much. I hope we stay friends in some way. It has been really an honor to meet the two of you. You are you represent not only the best of Israel, you represent the best of the Jewish people. And I'm just thrilled to be able to present you to the L'chaim audience and to JBS. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. You're both out of this world.
Thank you so much.
Kayla, Dulin, and Josh Malchman, two American Jews who served in the IDF as lone soldiers. They've made Aliyah, and they're now working with the Gideon Project, organized by Reservists on Duty, and they're here to bring Israel to college campuses where BDS has unfortunately taken a certain degree of hold. I find so much of what they said to be so on target, and when Kayla said, it's the 5% we're not going to reach, it's the 90% we're shooting for. That's a very important idea. It's an idea we as American Jews who care about the state of Israel and who talk all the time, and we're trying to learn as well. We should listen to that. There are certain people you'll never convince. Try to find somebody who is open, and then just talk to them. It's what Josh says, dialogue with them. I have trouble believing he doesn't ultimately want to make everybody pro-Israel, but I understand what he means. And both these kids are fabulous. As always, I invite you to be in touch with me with any thoughts or comments you may have to any of the things discussed, any of the ideas you heard here on this edition of L'chaim. Please email me, write me, post on our Facebook page, or tweet me. I look forward to hearing from many of you. By the way, if you want to be in touch with either Kayla or Josh, you email me. I will forward your emails on to them. Until the next time, I'm Mark Golub. L'chaim, my friends, to life.
L'chaim is a presentation of Jewish education in media.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support JBS, the Jewish Broadcasting Service, with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double chai or more, to the nonprofit organization Jewish Education in Media. Simply visit the JBS homepage and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check made out to Jem, Post Office Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.